So I'm recovering from COVID-19 this week. I tested positive back on Thursday. It's Sunday today, and I'm starting to feel better. And I thought I would record a video about some differences in sexual orientation and how I felt treated during this pandemic. See, a lot of people's images of this pandemic has been revolved around family life, right? They weren't able to say goodbye to their spouses who were dying in the hospital from COVID-19. They had to stay apart from their family during important events, right? People had their engagements broken off. What else? They weren't able to attend important life milestones, graduations. And it dawned on me that the person who was happily single has been forgotten during this pandemic. Now, don't get me wrong, I was just watching a movie about all the orphans of the pandemic. And don't get me wrong, that is very sad. But I thought I would point out that there are others going on. So if I were, fortunately, I take good care of my immune system, so I haven't had to go to the hospital or anything like that. But my one big fear of going to the hospital is that I've been hospitalized a few times in my past, and I've never been incapacitated or anything. But every time I go to the hospital, they want to give me all sorts of junk food, and it makes me wonder. If I wasn't sick going into the hospital, I could be very sick when I get out. And given that I live alone, that's a big concern for me. I'm always having to worry if I get into a car accident, be incapacitated. It's made me a lot safer driver, obviously. See, as a child, I had behavioral problems, in large part because of my atrocious diet. And I worry I'll go down that spiral again. Maybe I get into a car accident, I get fed junk food in the hospital, I have high-functioning autism, that starts to act up, and I get into trouble and maybe get myself in legal trouble, get arrested. It's a downward spiral, and that's a big fear of mine. Getting locked up in a quarantine facility. So I'm in Yakima, Washington right now. I found an Airbnb here because I didn't want to be out in the streets where I could have potentially somebody seeing me get sick and then locking me up and then running into that downward spiral. Right? It's been a big fear of mine. And that's a concern that a lot of my colleagues don't have to share because they live with somebody, they have somebody they love, they trust, and if I were to die of COVID in the hospital, I probably don't even have the luxury of having that one last Zoom call with a family member on the outside. Right? My family doesn't really agree with my sexual orientation. We had a falling out about that, and it's something that's overlooked. Right now, I'm actually much more worried about being incapacitated, getting sent to the hospital, have junk food shoved down my throat, and a couple needles up my arm, obviously. I'm actually more concerned about that than the physical issues of COVID-19. Fortunately, I'll probably be recovering by the end of the week, and hopefully be able to go back to work on Monday like nothing happened. But anyway, thought I would point out that the ways that things have. At the beginning of the pandemic, fortunately, people were getting better at this now. I kept hearing we're all in this together, but I really didn't feel I was part of that camaraderie. So I'm the only person in our team at work who is single, and oftentimes I had other priorities that didn't really get met. You got to remember, back in the spring of 2020, you couldn't go to a restaurant. You were cooking all your meals at home, but I didn't have somebody to cook for me because obviously I live alone, right? And I often didn't have time for that. Actually, it was a blessing in disguise that in 2020 I decided to start doing intermittent fasting. So I was only cooking once a day anyway. But I felt like I didn't get the receiving end of the we're all in this together, right? My coworker had to take some extra time off to take care of her niece, her sister, was recovering from COVID-19, and I ended up giving her all my vacation time. And I didn't feel like I got the receiving end of that, right? Nobody cooked for me. Nobody handled other things for me that were more challenging from being solosexual, right? Nobody handled, you get the idea, right? When my car was broken down and I was living out of my car, the car broke and I had to look for an Airbnb, which was like 2 counties away because back in September of 21, King County got paranoid about requiring you to show proof of having taken this drug just to look for an Airbnb, right? I didn't get anybody to help me, give me a ride or anything like that, right? And I had COVID challenges that were a little bit not so parallel to my colleagues, and I didn't feel like I got the equivalent of we're all in this together. Anyways, enough complaining. Singles have their own challenges too, whether it be during a pandemic, right now we're struggling with the war in Ukraine, the resulting inflation, and potentially a huge recession to come. And unfortunately, we'll probably repeat the same mistakes of overlooking the needs of people who have differences in sexual orientation. Like right now, my family and I got into a falling out because during the pandemic, I discovered how much I didn't want to get involved in a relationship. I call myself solosexual. My family and I had a falling out about that. But you know what? I remember 15 years ago, my mom also had a falling out with me because I was dating a girl of a different race, and my mom wanted me to marry an Asian girl, and we had a falling out about that. Fast forward 15 years later, and they're okay with me dating another race. They just don't want me to be solosexual. 15 years from now, who knows what it's going to be, right? Maybe I'll meet somebody from a different planet, and my mom will disagree with that. There's always something to be unhappy about, it seems like.